By 9 on a Friday, the Velvet Room stopped pretending it was a restaurant and became what it really was: a pressure chamber wrapped in gold leaf. From the street, you saw only frosted windows and a brass awning. Inside, the room unfolded in tiers of mirrored columns, low amber light, and velvet banquettes deep enough to swallow secrets whole. A jazz trio played standards nobody listened to. Judges drank single malt 2 tables away from men currently under indictment in their courts. Models with impossible cheekbones laughed at jokes from real estate sharks and men whose names never appeared on paper. Crystal chimed. Caviar vanished. Nobody looked directly at anyone they shouldn't know. Sienna Rivera watched all of it from the service rail above the main floor, a tablet in one hand and an earpiece pressed into dark hair pinned at her neck. 29, newly promoted night operations manager. She wore black silk, a hard expression, and the kind of heels that said she was done apologizing for taking up space. Staff called her Riv when they were trying to charm her and Boss when they were in trouble. She answered to both if the trays moved on time. Table 12 needs another bottle, crackled her headset. And the councilman's aide is asking if we can move him farther from the man he campaigned against, Sienna said. No. Let him practice bipartisan breathing. Send bottle, not opinions. A line cook snorted in passing. Her bartender, Nia, flashed a grin while polishing a coupe glass. Sienna didn't smile back right away, but the corner of her mouth twitched. She liked the rhythm of this place when it ran right. Too hot, too loud, too expensive, and held together by people who understood that precision was survival. She had learned that young. Her father had been NYPD for 23 years, the kind of cop who ironed his shirts before dawn and never let his service weapon leave his reach. Her mother worked overnights in an ER in the Bronx, where blood came in faster than paperwork. From both of them, Sienna inherited 2 truths. Violence announces itself before it arrives, and cleanup is always uglier than the event. That instinct was why she'd been promoted. Officially, the Velvet Room belonged to a luxury hospitality group with bland logos and excellent accountants. Unofficially, everyone knew Don Mateo DeLuca had interests here, which was the polite Manhattan phrasing for ownership backed by fear. Sienna had never met the Don at length, but she had met his son. Repeatedly, inconveniently, and often at an angle too close for comfort. Luca DeLuca sat tonight at a crescent booth on the private mezzanine, half in shadow, dark suit open at the throat, one hand loose around a whiskey he hadn't touched. Men looked at him and recalculated their tone. Women looked at him and forgot theirs. Sienna had seen him calm down fights with a glance and start them with a sentence. He was trouble-dressed as restraint, as if summoned by thought. He tipped his chin up toward the rail and met her eyes. No smile, just that direct, unsettling attention. Then he raised 2 fingers, a private signal. Sienna muttered into her mic, "Rico, take my floor for 5. Copy." She took the stairs down to mezzanine level. Luca's 2 bodyguards shifted to let her through. At his table, 2 men from shipping sat rigidly with espresso cups and documents they pretended weren't documents. "You're late," Luca said. "You're early," Sienna replied. "Miracles happen." One of the shipping men looked offended. Luca looked amused. "Need a private room in 20. No staff outside your trusted list." "Done. Anything else, Your Highness?" His eyes flicked over her face like he was checking for damage. "Eat something." She stared at him. "You dragged me over here to prescribe protein?" "I dragged you over here," he said, voice low enough for only her. "Because your left shoulder has been tight all night, and when you're wound up, you forget food. Then you get dizzy and pretend you're fine." I hate that you notice things. I know. She turned before he could see that land. It always did. That was the problem with Luca. Every just one more favor arrived wrapped in practical necessity and left fingerprints somewhere personal. Earlier that evening, by 7:10, she'd settled 3 supplier disputes, ejected a venture capitalist who thought no photos was a suggestion, and found time to confiscate a vape pen from a busser. In the service corridor, Nia cornered her with 2 lattes and gossip. "You hear about Mercer?" Nia asked. "The finance guy who got clipped in Tribeca." "Not clipped. Shot through his office window, 19th floor, boom, done." Sienna took the latte. "You are too cheerful saying that." "I'm not cheerful. I'm caffeinated. Also, this place, hostile work environment, we need hazard pay and medieval armor." "Put it in HR." Sienna deadpanned. "Already did. They sent me a mindfulness PDF." Sienna laughed, brief and sharp. "Unions died for this." Later, when she ran to a prop warehouse in Chelsea for replacement banquet candelabras, because of course somebody had snapped 3 during rehearsal dinner setup, she passed a rack of surplus costume armor and old police props. Hanging between fake riot shields and stage swords was a bulky black vest with a yellowed tag. "Ballistic panel, level 3A, for theater/stunt use, no warranty." She touched it, then heard Nia in her head, hostile work environment, and against all sane instinct, bought it for $80 cash. At 8:40 in her office, she held the vest up and laughed at how ugly it was. Rico stuck his head in. "What in God's name is that?" "Morale equipment," she said, "for hostile work environment night." He barked a laugh. "You're insane." Efficiently insane. She slid the vest over her camisole and under her silk blouse. It was too long in the torso and too thick at the ribs, turning her into a rectangular version of herself. Her blouse strained. She looked like a magician smuggling textbooks. She tucked in anyway, adjusted her blazer, and decided if anybody commented, she'd blame dry cleaning. By 9:05, the room was at capacity. The air tasted of truffle butter, cigar smoke, and expensive perfume trying to conquer both. Her earpiece fed her a stream of needs. Candles at 14, gluten-free emergency at 6, a name correction on a place card that could ruin a merger if misspelled. Normal chaos. Manageable chaos. At 9:12, one of Luca's men met her by the kitchen pass and handed over 2 cream envelopes, wax-sealed, no names on the front. "From Mr. DeLuca," he said, "to be delivered by hand, directly." Sienna frowned. "Why me?" His instruction. Of course it was. She tucked the envelopes into a leather folio and headed up the private stair to the mezzanine bridge, a narrow run of smoked glass and black steel that crossed above the main floor. From here she could see everything: the stage, the bar, the glittering mouths of people lying to each other for sport. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. "Nia." "You better not actually be wearing that vest," lol, Sienna typed back while walking. "I'm committed to the bit." A wall clock mounted above the mezzanine exit clicked from 9:13 to 9:14. The sound came first, not loud, but wrong. A hard crack with a metallic tail like a firework fired indoors. The smoked glass panel to her right starred white, then exploded inward. Something hit her chest like a sledgehammer swung by God. She didn't feel pain, not at first. She felt force. Air vanished. Her feet left the floor and then returned badly. The folio flew from her hand. She hit the glass walkway on her back, vision flashing white, ears filled with static. For one stunned half-second, the whole club froze in tableau. A soprano mid-note, a waiter mid-pour, a billionaire with his mouth open over a joke. Then everyone screamed at once. Bodyguards drew from under jackets, chairs scraped. A woman in sequins dropped to the floor and crawled under a table. Someone shouted, "Shoot her!" twice, in 2 different accents. Sienna tried to inhale and got nothing but a thin, animal gasp. Her chest felt caved in. She clawed at her blouse, sure she'd been split open, sure she was dying, and her fingers found only torn silk and something hard beneath it. Footsteps thundered. Luca was suddenly above her, on his knees, one hand behind her head, the other searching her sternum, her neck, her sides, with ruthless speed. "Sienna, look at me. Look at me." She couldn't focus. There was blood on his shirt cuff, bright against white cotton, and for one terror-struck second, she thought it was hers. Then she saw a deep slash across his palm where glass had cut him grabbing her. "I can't," she rasped. "You can," he said, voice gone raw. "Breathe through me. In. Again." She dragged in air. It burned like swallowing fire. Below them, security forced guests toward interior exits, away from windows. One of Luca's men smashed the mezzanine light panel, darkening the line of sight from outside. Another man yelled into a radio for medevac, no sirens, private entrance. Luca's eyes dropped to the bulge under her shredded blouse. His expression shifted from panic to disbelief, to something close to fury. "What are you wearing?" She coughed a laugh that hurt. "Hostile. Work environment." He stared, then made a sound halfway between a curse and a prayer. His forehead touched hers for one brief, shaking second before he pulled back and became all command. "Lock this block down," he snapped to his guards. "Nobody leaves without my say. Sweep rooftops, west and south angles. Now." The next 30 minutes blurred into controlled violence. She was moved to the back office, checked by a private physician who confirmed cracked bruising, no penetration, probable fractured rib if unlucky. The bullet had flattened against the vest panel and dropped somewhere on the walkway. Someone bagged it. Someone else took her blouse as evidence. Nia arrived crying and furious and hugged her too hard until the doctor swore at both of them. By 10:30, the main room looked almost normal again. New glass taped in place, blood cleaned from chrome, music switched to a softer set, as if ambiance could rewind physics. Half the guests had been quietly escorted out through service corridors with non-disclosure agreements and complimentary memberships. At 11:07, 2 NYPD detectives arrived and were directed not to the scene, but to a conference room with excellent scotch and no windows. They emerged 22 minutes later, tight-lipped and empty-handed. At 11:45, Sienna sat wrapped in a hotel robe in Luca's upstairs office, ice pack pressed to her chest, while his tech chief played security feeds on a wall monitor. Cameras showed the dining room, the bar, corridors, loading dock. The mezzanine angle at 9:14 glitched to static for 14 seconds, then resumed with her already on the floor. "That feed was clean at 9, the tech chief said. Either a loop was inserted live or someone hard-cut access from inside. "Inside?" Sienna repeated. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. By midnight, the police copy of the footage had somehow degraded to corrupted file. The city system showed no usable ballistic trajectory. The narrative beginning to circulate was accidental discharge from construction 2 blocks over, which was so absurd it almost qualified as art. Luca dismissed everyone but kept 2 guards at the door. He stood by the window, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, dried blood still on his cuff. When he finally faced her, his eyes looked feral. Too bright, sleepless, stripped of polish. "Whoever fired knew your route," he said. Knew your timing. Knew you'd cross the bridge exactly then. She held his gaze. Then it wasn't random. No. His jaw worked once. It was choreography. The words settled in the room like smoke. Sienna thought of the envelopes, now in an evidence bag on his desk, of the shipping men, of who knew she carried for him and when, of all the tiny routines that made a night run smoothly and made a perfect kill possible. What was in them? She asked. Luca didn't answer immediately. That told her enough. Transfers, he said at last. Offshore holdings, numbers, signatures, routing keys. Money laundering? Money movement. She almost smiled at the euphemism. Almost. A knock. One of the guards leaned in. We got word. West Side crews are asking questions already. Task force called twice. They're offering Miss Rivera protective custody. Luca laughed once, without humor. How generous. Sienna knew that offer. Custody meant isolation, interrogation, pressure wrapped in policy language. She would become a witness before she understood what she had witnessed. After the guard left, silence stretched. What am I now? She asked quietly. Asset? Liability? Bait? Luca crossed the room and crouched in front of her so they were eye level. Up close, she could see how hard he was holding himself together. You're alive, he said. That is the only category I care about tonight. That's not true, and you know it. He didn't deny it. Outside the office glass, the club hummed with fake normalcy. Inside, the world had already tilted. A shot meant to kill her had failed, and failure in this world demanded correction. Loyalists would hide her. Rivals would hunt her. Law enforcement would package her. Everyone would call it protection. Sienna pressed the ice pack harder against the bruise blooming across her chest and felt the ridged dent in the vest panel through the robe fabric, a crude, ridiculous miracle. She had worn it as a joke. Now it sat on the sofa like a dead animal that had taken her place. I'm not disappearing into somebody's safe room and waiting to be moved like furniture, she said. Luca's expression turned to flint. You don't get a vote on survival. I always get a vote. Their stare locked, heat and anger, and something more dangerous underneath. Finally, he stood, paced once, then stopped. You can't go home. You can't stay here. I have a penthouse in Tribeca, secure entry, blind elevators, my people on rotation. You stay there until we identify the shooter and the leak. My people? She said. Or yours? For now, he said. The only reason you're breathing is that you wore a vest to make a joke. Don't make me trust luck twice. She looked at him, at the blood he hadn't washed off, at the fear he would never name, and understood the shape of the trap closing around her. If she went with him, she stepped deeper into his world. If she refused, she stepped alone into crosshairs already dialed to her height. At 12:18 a.m., Sienna Rivera signed a temporary relocation form she didn't trust, slipped her phone into a Faraday pouch she hated, and left the velvet room through a loading dock under armed escort. On the floor above, someone boxed up broken, smoked glass. On the mezzanine bridge, a white chalk mark circled where the bullet had struck her dead center and stopped. The SUV doors sealed with a padded thud that made the city sound far away. Sienna sat in the back between Luca and a bodyguard she recognized from the mezzanine, his jacket unbuttoned just enough to clear his holster. Another vehicle slid in behind them as they pulled out of the alley. No sirens. No lights. Just 3 black cars moving like a single thought through lower Manhattan. Her chest pulsed with each breath, a deep, spreading ache under the robe and borrowed sweatshirt someone had shoved over her shoulders. The dented vest lay on the floor by her feet in a plastic evidence bag, ugly and undeniable. Luca watched traffic, jaw tight, phone dark in his hand. "Say something useful," she said. His eyes cut to her. "Useful like what?" "Like who wanted me dead. You were in the way. I don't buy collateral tonight." He looked back out of the window. "Neither do I." That answer told her two things. He was scared enough to lie by omission, and angry enough to convince himself that counted as protection. They rolled into Tribeca through service streets and down a private ramp under a limestone tower with no doorman in sight. The garage gate closed behind them before she was fully out of the car. Concrete, fluorescent lights, cameras and smoked domes at every corner. "Welcome home," Luca said without irony. "Temporary," she corrected. A blind elevator took them to the 32nd floor. No button panel inside, just a key slot and a camera lens at eye level. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that looked like an architectural rendering of controlled power. Floor-to-ceiling glass over the river, steel and walnut, pale rugs, no family photos, no clutter that hadn't been chosen. The first thing Sienna noticed was what she could not see. No neighboring windows at her height, no obvious exterior access points, no soft perimeter. The second thing she noticed was the man by the kitchen island, silver-haired compact, in a navy suit despite the hour. "Tommaso Bellini," Luca said. "Security chief." Tommaso gave her a small nod. "Ms. Rivera, I wish we'd met socially." "Given tonight?" she said. "I don't." He almost smiled. A female medic in slate scrubs appeared from a side hall with a black case. "I need to evaluate bruising and respiratory function," she said. Sienna glanced at Luca. "Do I get to consent? Or is that quaint now?" "You consent," Luca said immediately. "Always." The medic examined her in a guest suite that looked more expensive than her apartment lease. Purple was already blossoming under her sternum, angry and centered. No puncture wound, no obvious fracture, though every deep inhale lit her up. "Pain meds," the medic said, handing over 2 tablets. "Take one now, one in 6 hours. Don't try to be brave with breathing. Shallow breaths can put you in pneumonia territory faster than gunfire." "My mother would like you," Sienna muttered, swallowing one dry. When she came back to the main room, Luca was at the island with Tommaso. Speaking in low Sicilian, she only partly followed. She heard 3 words clearly anyway: rooftop leak and list. Tommaso left. Locks clicked somewhere in the walls. Luca poured water and slid it to her. "Ground rules." She barked a short laugh. "Of course. You don't leave without me or Tommaso. No personal phone. Use the secure line in the study. Food and deliveries get screened downstairs. You need anything, you ask." She took the glass but didn't drink. "And in exchange?" "In exchange, you stay alive." "In exchange, Luca." He leaned both hands on the island and met her eyes. "In exchange, I tell you what I can when I can verify it." "Not good enough." "It's what exists." She wanted to throw the glass at the wall just to hear something break cleanly. Instead, she said, "I carried sealed envelopes through your club and got shot center mass. I'm done being useful in fragments." His voice lowered. "You think I don't know that?" "I think you've spent your whole life deciding what women can safely know." He flinched. Not much, but enough. Before either of them could escalate, the secure line on the wall lit up. Tommaso's voice came through the intercom. "Call for Ms. Rivera, Manhattan DA Task Force, Assistant District Attorney Naomi Kessler. She says this is urgent." Sienna held Luca's gaze as she answered. "Patch it." A woman's voice entered the room, smooth as polished steel. "Ms. Rivera, I'm glad to hear you're conscious. Comforting opening. I'd prefer candor. You were present during an attempted homicide linked to ongoing financial crimes. We can place you in protective custody tonight. Sienna looked at the locked glass doors, the armed men she'd passed, the city she couldn't reach. And then we ensure your safety while we take your statement. Ensure like witness suite, or ensure like leverage? A pause. You were carrying documents tied to offshore transfers, Ms. Rivera. This is bigger than a nightclub shooting. There it was. Luca didn't move, but something in him hardened. I'll consider counsel first, Sienna said. You should also consider that people around Mr. DeLuca are currently deleting evidence. Luca stepped forward, hit mute, and said, Do not give them anything over a line. Sienna unmuted. Send your formal request in writing. Good night, Ms. Kessler. She hung up. For a moment, neither spoke. City lights flickered off the river like static. Finally, she said, They already know about the envelopes. They knew before you did, Luca said. You're both circling the same carcass and calling it public service. His mouth quirked without humor. Now you're speaking fluent Manhattan. She set down the water. I want the access logs from Velvet Room cameras, staff movement reports, and everyone who knew I was taking those envelopes upstairs. That list is short. Then it should be easy. It includes people who've worked for my family 20 years. Great, she said. Long enough to get expensive. He stared at her a beat longer, then nodded once. Study. 10 minutes. When he walked away, Sienna realized her hands were shaking. Not from fear now, from momentum. She was done absorbing impact. If there was choreography, she'd find the choreographer. By 3:10 a.m., she had 6 screens open in Luca's study and a whiteboard dragged in from somewhere down the hall. Access log timestamps lined one side. Staff assignments lined the other. In the middle, she wrote the same question 3 ways. Who knew route plus timing plus envelope transfer? Rico had known she was covering mezzanine for 5 minutes. Luca had known she'd be summoned. Luca's table guards had known she was carrying. Tech had known where cameras were blind. Security had known her pathing pattern on busy nights. Too many circles. Too much overlap. She marked one anomaly in red. At 9:11 p.m., someone with admin-level credentials briefly disabled the mezzanine west camera for calibration. Re-enabled at 9:14:16. 14 seconds of static, exactly what she saw on replay. Calibration required dual confirmation. 2 logins, not 1. Who had this level? She asked when Luca returned with coffee she didn't trust yet. He set the cup down untouched. Me, Tommaso. My uncle Vittorio for Legacy Override. Tech lead Bruno. Legacy Override? The phrase stuck in her head like a fishbone. Luca watched her scan. Sleep 2 hours. You're running on adrenaline and spite. I'm running on pattern recognition. You're in pain. She looked up. So are you. Sit down. He did. Across from her, close enough she could see where he'd scrubbed blood off his cuff and missed a thread near the seam. Your hand, she said. It's nothing. Show me. He offered it, almost irritated. The palm cut was clean but deep enough to need closure strips. She fetched the med kit left by the nurse and started cleaning it, while he held still like this was a negotiation he wasn't sure he should win. You always this bossy? He asked. Only with men who bleed on expensive shirts. He exhaled, a rough half laugh, and for a second the room thinned to skin and breath and the press of her fingers around his wrist. Then he withdrew first. Get some rest, he said, voice back to command. She didn't. At 7:42 a.m., she was still in the study when Tommaso came in unannounced, expression flattened by training. "We have a problem in the garage," he said. The black Mercedes SUV slated for Sienna's escorted trip to her apartment sat on Bay 3 with its hood up and a mechanic crouched beneath the front axle. Tommaso handed Luca a tablet showing a zoomed photo. Clean nick, clean angle, rear brake line partially severed. "Not wear and tear," Tommaso said. Cut started, then pinched to delay full failure. It would have held maybe 10 blocks. Sienna folded her arms against the cold of the garage. "Route posted?" Tommaso nodded. "Internal security channel only, 6 people. Any camera?" "Looped, 41 seconds. Sienna laughed once, too sharp. "Our ghost likes symmetry." Luca's face had gone still in the dangerous way she'd seen on the mezzanine before men lost careers. "Lock down every driver. Nobody moves." As orders rippled outward, Sienna stepped closer to the SUV and crouched despite the protest in her ribs. Sweet, chemical smell still lingered near the wheel well. Her father had taught her that smell in a Bronx precinct garage when she was 15 and bored. "You didn't need me dead at the club," she said quietly. "You needed me dead en route. Safer, cleaner, deniable." Luca heard it anyway. "You're not leaving this building?" That was already true. Back upstairs, Tommaso doubled guards and rotated kitchen staff. Sienna hated all of it, hated the soft prison quality of expensive safety. She hated more that each new attempt validated Luca's fear, because fear made him lock tighter. By noon, she had a fresh shirt, bruised lungs, and a list of names with too many old loyalties attached. She cornered Bruno, the tech lead, over secure video, and made him walk through camera authentication protocols like she was auditing a casino. "Dual login is sequential or simultaneous?" she asked. "Sequential. Window? 30 seconds. So one person can trigger, another can bless later. In theory. In murder, Bruno, everything is theory until ballistics." He swallowed. "Yes." At 2:06 p.m., Luca came into the kitchen with 2 demitasse cups on a tray, annoyance and fatigue competing in his posture. "If you refuse to sleep," he said, "you're at least drinking something." Sienna eyed the cups. "From where?" "House machine." Tommaso watched. She reached for the nearer cup, then without thinking switched them. An old service habit from years of testing temperature and consistency. Luca noticed and raised a brow. "Control issues?" he asked. "Quality assurance." She took a sip. Bitter. Floral in the wrong way. Then a metallic numbness bloomed on her tongue and crept toward the back of her throat. She spat into the sink instantly, coughing hard enough to light up her chest injury. The cup slipped from her hand and shattered. Luca was at her side before the last shard stopped spinning. "What?" "Don't drink," she managed. Wrong. Numbing. Tommaso was already yelling for the medic. He grabbed Luca's cup, then Sienna's broken saucer, bagging both with gloved hands. The medic forced water, then charcoal slurry that tasted like wet asphalt. Sienna gagged, cursed, drank anyway. 10 minutes later, her lips tingled less. Her pulse stayed high but steady. Lab strip results came back in 22 minutes. A conatine trace, low dose but not accidental. Enough to trigger arrhythmia in a stressed body, enough to make a medical event in a woman hit by a bullet the night before. Luca slammed his fist into the pantry door so hard the hinge bent. "That was for me," he said, voice shaking with rage. Sienna wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Or for whoever drank from your cup." His eyes snapped to hers, realization colliding with horror. She had switched them. Tommaso started issuing orders for kitchen detentions, badge scans, blood tests. Luca turned to go with him, then stopped when Sienna said, "No, you don't get to storm and scorch everything while I sit in a room." He rounded on her. "You almost stopped breathing. And if I stay blind, I definitely stop later." "Damn it, Sienna." "Listen." She planted both palms on the island and forced her voice level. 2 attempts in 12 hours. Both needed internal schedules. Both had clean camera loops. That means access plus authority. Not a random sold-out waiter. Somebody whose orders don't get questioned. Silence. Tommaso's gaze shifted between them, then settled on Luca. She's right. Luca looked like he wanted to fight the fact of her competence itself, because it meant admitting she belonged in the center of this. Finally, he gave one tight nod. "What do you need?" Sienna exhaled once. "The envelopes, not the contents you locked away. The stubs, seals, handling chain." They were bagged. Then unbag them. An hour later, they were back in the study with nitrile gloves and evidence packets spread over a polished desk worth more than her first apartment. 2 cream envelope remnants. Wax seals cracked, torn fiber edges. At first glance, nothing. Sienna held one stub under angled light. Tiny indentations along the inside flap caught shadow, faint, evenly spaced pinpricks. Not random, not machine seam. Patterned. "Who prepped these?" she asked. "Shipping office prints and seals," Luca said. "Supervised by Vittorio's admin when it's high value." There again. Vittorio. She took a UV pen light from the desk drawer, swept it over the paper. Nothing. She warmed the wax residue with a mug of hot water beneath, just enough to soften surface oils. Pale graphite ghosts surfaced along the flap interior. Numbers, abbreviated letters, not destination codes. Ledger fragments. "Get me transfer sheets from last quarter and any shell vendors tied to your uncle's side operations," she said. Luca didn't move. "You think this points to Vittorio?" "I think somebody hid a key in plain sight on paper nobody expects the carrier to keep. Old school dead drop logic. If your uncle's admin handled these, either he's compromised or he built the compromise." His face shut down into old family stone. "Careful." She met it head on. "Careful got me shot." By 11:48 p.m., the whiteboard held 3 columns of numbers, 2 shell companies, and 1 name circled hard enough to dent the board. VR Advisory Holdings. Registered in Delaware, routed through Malta. Paid a consulting retainer 48 hours before the shooting to a security subcontractor that rented rooftop maintenance access across from the Velvet Room. Same entity paid for a temporary camera service account that touched Bruno's admin panel for exactly 14 seconds. Sienna sat on the floor against the study wall, legs out, laptop warm on her thighs. Luca stood by the window reading the printouts she'd assembled, each page making him quieter. "Say it," she said. He didn't look at her. Could be spoofed. Could be. Then explain why VR also paid Bell Tower chauffeur services 3 hours before our garage brake line was cut, and why Bell Tower's owner is a cousin on Vittorio's wife's side. Still nothing. She pushed up, pain slicing her chest. "Look at me and lie clean if you can." He turned slowly. Whatever armor he wore in public was cracking at the edges now. "I knew he was moving money," Luca said. The words landed flat and brutal. "How long?" "Months." Her laugh came out broken. "Months. I didn't have proof it was hostile. Everyone moves money. Not everyone hires rooftop shooters. I didn't know that part. You knew enough to keep me out of it." "Yes." The simple honesty stung worse than deflection. "To protect me?" she asked. "Or to keep me useful and uninformed?" His jaw tightened. Both. At first one, then the other. Then I couldn't tell where the line was. She stared at him, suddenly exhausted down to bone. "You don't get to decide my risk profile for me," she said quietly. "That's not protection. That's ownership with better branding." He crossed the room, stopped short of touching her. "I watched you get hit and thought you were dying in my hands. I am trying not to relive that every time a door opens. And I'm trying not to become a package everybody bargains over." They stood in that raw space, breath and anger, and the echo of what almost happened between them twice now. In the hall, a guard knocked once and entered when Luca called. "Task force vehicles parked across the street," the guard said. "Unmarked. 2 units. "Watching," Sienna said. "Waiting," Luca corrected. She grabbed her jacket from the chair. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To the elevator." "With what plan?" "Any plan that doesn't involve me living in your vault until your uncle decides whether to kill me at home or in transit." He caught her wrist, not hard, but enough to stop her. "If you walk to them now, they bury you in procedure and leak your statement before dawn. Vittorio will know every line you gave by breakfast." She hated that he was probably right. Sienna pulled free and paced once, thinking fast, feeling the grid click into place the way it did on a slammed Friday, when 3 disasters hit at once and only one sequence kept the room from burning. Vittorio wanted her erased quietly. The task force wanted her isolated quietly. Luca wanted her hidden quietly. Quiet was the weapon. She turned back, eyes on both men. "Then no one gets quiet." Luca frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning, if your uncle wants me gone because I can tie him to payments, I become impossible to disappear without witnesses, cameras, donors, electeds, federal eyes, everybody in one room." "The Velvet Room is closed pending repairs," the guard said before he could stop himself. "Not for long," Sienna replied. "You reopen fast for the St. Bridget Children's Fund Gala next week, right? I saw the draft invite list on your dining server." Luca's gaze sharpened. "You were in my server?" "I run operations. I read everything." She stepped closer, voice steady now, strategic calm sliding over bruised fear. "We bait with what Vittorio thinks he needs. Final transfer codes. Let him believe they're with me. We wire me, wire the room, preload the financials to a dead man trigger. If anything happens to me, records dump live to every screen and 3 external recipients." "You're proposing to stand in the open as target," Luca said. "I already am the target. This way, I pick the stage." Tommaso had appeared in the doorway, listening. He looked at Luca. "It could work if we control ingress and put federal units in queue without disclosing full objective." Luca didn't answer immediately. He was looking at Sienna like she had just become something new and terrifying and inevitable. Finally, he said, very softly, "If we do this, there is no going back." Sienna touched the bruise over her sternum, right where the bullet had stopped, and held his gaze. "Good," she said. "I'm not interested in going back." "Good," Luca echoed, but it sounded like he was answering a verdict. Tommaso stepped fully into the study. "If we do this, we narrow the circle now. No broad briefings, no digital draft plans, no mention of venue on open channels?" Sienna nodded. 3-tier prep. Public event logistics through normal staff so it doesn't spook anyone. Security overlays, compartmentalized. Evidence trigger isolated and mirrored off-site. Luca gave her a sharp look. "You already have architecture?" "I run a nightclub where senators drink near men with active warrants. Architecture is my hobby." Tommaso moved to the whiteboard and started writing names. Trusted only. Me, 2 floor captains, 1 signal tech not tied to Bruno, and legal liaison. Add 1 ADA contact, Sienna said. Kessler or someone she can't sideline. Luca's mouth hardened. You trust her? I trust her ambition. If she smells a public corruption splash big enough, she'll come. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed twice in fast succession. Then a third time, Tommaso's did the same. They both looked down at the screens. Tommaso swore in Italian. Luca turned his phone so Sienna could see. A push alert from a city gossip news account with enough real leaks to be dangerous. Velvet room manager linked to offshore fraud. Source says shooting was inside insurance play. A second alert followed from a mainstream outlet. Sanitized, but worse. The task force requests interview with club executive Sienna Rivera in connection to financial investigation. Below it, grainy stills. Sienna on the mezzanine holding the folio. Sienna in the loading dock robe. Sienna entering Luca's garage. They're burning you in public, Luca said quietly. Sienna felt heat rise in her throat. How did they get loading dock shots? Tommaso was already on his headset. Internal camera export, time-stamped after midnight. Somebody pulled from archive. The study TV flickered as another channel picked up the story. A former prosecutor, paid to sound outraged, said phrases like operational girlfriend and facilitator witness. Her face filled the screen while a red banner crawled beneath it. Then Tommaso held up a hand for silence. Another development, he said, listening to his earpiece. Board counsel filed emergency authority challenge. Vittorio claims temporary control over De Luca hospitality and security assets due Luca's impaired judgment under emotional duress. Luca let out a single, stunned breath that became a laugh with no humor. He's quoting bylaws my father wrote in '98. Sienna looked between them. Can he do it? Not cleanly, Tommaso said. Not without captain support. But even contested, it freezes decision chains. Payroll, venue access, vehicle rosters, contracting authority. Everything goes into legal fog. And while we untangle fog, Sienna said, he writes the narrative. Luca's phone rang again. He answered on speaker. A gravelly male voice came through. Captain Renzetti, one of Matteo's old men. Luca, my guys are hearing you lost the room. West Side already probing Hudson routes. If this family looks split by dawn, streets go hot. Hold your lines, Luca said. No one moves without my order. A beat. With respect, kid. Half the captains just got council notice with Vittorio's signature and Don's old seal. Men follow paper when bullets are expensive. The call ended. Silence swallowed the room. If Vittorio kept control for even 24 hours, Sienna saw the chain reaction clearly. Club staff unpaid and exposed, loyal captains forced to pick sides, rivals testing borders, one bad stop and frisk turning into 3 retaliations by midnight. And at the center, her, painted as thief, liar, maybe architect of her own shooting. No jury needed if the city decided first. Luca looked at her, fury banked to a cold line. He's trying to make you unusable before we can make you visible. Then we move faster, she said. Tommaso's expression was grim. Faster needs proof stronger than envelope ghosts. Sienna tapped the circled company name on the board. Then we pull primary records from source. Luca understood first. Bruno's cold mirror. Tommaso nodded once. Queen's data cage. Air-gapped backup, if it still exists. Luca was already reaching for his jacket. We go now. They moved at 1:52 a.m. in a matte gray delivery van that smelled like cardboard and diesel, not luxury leather, No convoy this time. Just Luca, Sienna, Tommaso, and 2 men Tommaso called the last ones I'd trust with my mother's address. Sienna wore a borrowed puffer coat over a compression wrap around her ribs. The pistol tucked at the small of her back felt both alien and inevitable. Queen's at that hour was sodium lights and shuttered roll gates. The data cage sat behind an HVAC supplier in Long Island City, invisible unless you knew which loading door had no company logo and 2 extra cameras tucked in gutter shadow. Tommaso keyed the side entrance. Green light. Lock clicked. Too easy, Sienna whispered. Inside, narrow hallway, server hum, cold air. They split by plan, Tommaso and 1 guard to power room, Luca and Sienna with the 2nd guard to archive bay. Rows of black racks glowed like vertical cities. Luca moved with practiced speed to a locked cabinet at the far wall, scanned, entered code, then a 2nd code Sienna didn't know. Drawer popped. 3 ruggedized drives sat in foam cutouts. He handed one to Sienna. This is it. Then the overhead lights died. Emergency red strobes snapped on. The server hum dipped, surged, dipped again. Gunfire cracked from the hallway. 3 fast shots. 1 scream. Tommaso shouted something in Sicilian she didn't catch. Another shot. Then silence. Down! Luca barked, pulling Sienna behind the rack as bullets chewed metal where they'd been standing a second earlier. The guard with them fired back toward the doorway, then jerked and fell, blood fanning dark across cable trays. Sienna's ears rang. She clutched the drive to her chest like it could stop rounds the way the vest had. Footsteps approached, careful, unhurried. A voice floated through the strobing red light. You always did pick dramatic women, nephew. Vittorio didn't appear. He didn't need to. His certainty filled the room anyway. Luca leaned around the rack and fired twice. Sparks blew from the opposite wall. No body dropped. Smoke canister rolled under the server row, hissing white. Not military grade, just enough to blind and choke. Back exit. Luca coughed, grabbing Sienna's wrist. They ran bent low through the maze as alarms finally woke up above them. At the rear fire door, Luca slammed the bar. Nothing. Mag locked. Sienna looked up, spotted a manual override box, smashed it with the butt of her pistol. Plastic shattered. She yanked red wires free with bare fingers. The lock clunked open. Cold night air hit them like a wave as they spilled into an alley behind dumpsters and chain link. Tommaso staggered out 10 seconds later, 1 hand clamped to his side, blood soaking through his fingers. Where's Raffi? Luca shouted. Tommaso's face went gray. Down. Sirens, distant then closer. Automatic alarm dispatch, not theirs. They piled into the van and peeled out before uniforms arrived. Only when they hit the bridge did Sienna look down at the drive in her lap. Foam shell intact. Port snapped clean off. A bullet had punched through the casing. No, she whispered. Luca snatched it, saw the damage, and slammed his fist into the dashboard hard enough to crack the plastic trim. Damn it. Tommaso, sweating through blood loss in the back, forced words out. Secondary? Was in cabinet, Luca said. Gone. Sienna's throat tightened. He let us get exactly 1. Broken. Tommaso nodded once, eyes closing briefly. Set piece. He wanted you to survive with less than proof. By the time they reached Tribeca, paramedics in private uniforms were waiting in the garage. Tommaso was rushed upstairs for emergency stitching and transfusion. Raffi was confirmed dead by a 2-word text from the 2nd team still on site. Sienna stood in Luca's kitchen with smoke in her hair and someone else's blood dry on her cuff and watched the sunrise stain the river pink like an insult. Their best hard evidence was gone. 1 trusted man was dead. Tommaso was off the board for at least 48 hours, maybe more. and Vittorio now knew they were desperate enough to run operations in person. For the first time since 9/14, Sienna felt doubt slide under her armor. Maybe visibility wasn't enough. Maybe she had confused being brave with being useful. Maybe she was about to get everyone around her killed for a trap that no longer had teeth. She sank into a dining chair and pressed both palms over her eyes until stars burst behind them. Luca stood across the room, breathing hard, then turned and walked out without a word. She didn't stop him. Luca went to the only place in the penthouse without cameras. A narrow utility terrace off the mechanical room, shielded by concrete fins and river wind. He braced both hands on the parapet and tried to breathe past the taste of gunpowder. Raffi dead. Tommaso bleeding. Sienna almost trapped in smoke because he had believed, for one stupid heartbeat, that moving quickly could outrun betrayal. He had learned this lesson before. At 19, he had trusted Vittorio with a route change after a kidnapping threat. Vittorio had smiled, touched his cheek like family, and promised extra cars. That night, the lead vehicle hit a truck broadside in Red Hook. Luca survived because he'd switched seats to make a phone call. Paolo, his driver since childhood, died with Luca's coat over him. The police wrote it as reckless trucking. Matteo called it fate and poured grappa for the men at the wake. Vittorio stood in the front row and cried into a handkerchief that smelled like cedar. Luca had never proven anything, so he built a religion out of control instead. Know every door, hold every code, keep everyone you love behind glass thick enough to stop chance. Then Sienna walked into his life with a smart mouth and a talent for seeing the one angle everyone else ignored. And control started feeling like a cage built from his own hands. The terrace door opened softly behind him. He didn't turn. You should be resting. So should you. Her voice was rough, tired. No edge left on it for now. She stepped beside him, wrapped in a blanket over tactical black, hair pulled back badly like she'd done it with shaking hands. For a while, they just listened to the wind. Then Luca said, Paolo died because I told Vittorio where I'd be. Sienna didn't speak. I've spent 10 years pretending uncertainty is a thing I can beat if I lock enough doors. You call it ownership. You're right. He swallowed. I call it the only way I knew to keep people breathing. She looked at him then, not soft exactly, but open. I'm scared all the time now, he said, and the admission scraped him raw. Not of being shot, of watching you disappear 1 inch at a time because I decided something for you again. Sienna pulled the blanket tighter around herself. I'm scared of becoming evidence with a pulse. Different flavor, same panic. He laughed under his breath, almost a sob. I don't know how to do this clean. We're past clean. He nodded, eyes on the river again. Then hear me dirty. If we can't nail him legally at the gala, I have men who will solve it another way. There. The core of him. Violence as fallback, inherited like eye color. Sienna went very still. And if you do that, everything we've bled for collapses. Consent decrees, legitimacy, your father's people not getting mowed down in retaliation, all of it. I know. Do you? She stepped in front of him now, forcing eye contact. Because I need your word before we walk into that room. No executions, no, he slipped in custody. No improvising vengeance when it hurts. His face tightened as if she'd asked him to amputate something. Finally, quietly, he said, My word. She studied him another long second, then nodded once. The terrace door banged open. One of the night guards, pale and breathless. We have an inbound package. No courier record. Left in service elevator. The box sat on the kitchen island, matte black, no label, no prints. Bomb tech scanned it first. No wiring, no explosive signature. He gave a reluctant nod and stepped back. Luca opened it with a chef's knife. Inside, a battered chrome lighter with "The Velvet Room" etched on one side and a scratched R on the other. Rico's, the one he flipped between his fingers on smoke breaks out back. Beside it, a burner phone already ringing. Sienna answered on speaker. A man whimpered on the other end, muffled. Then a voice forced calm. "Riv? Don't do anything dumb." "Rico?" Sienna's knees nearly gave. The line clicked. Vittorio came on smooth as velvet over razor wire. "Good morning, Kara. I dislike crude leverage, but urgency is educational." "Where are they?" Luca's voice was ice. "Alive. For now." A pause. "Your people are so sentimental. It makes logistics tedious." Sienna gripped the phone until her knuckles blanched. "If you touch them, if I intended to kill them immediately, we would not be speaking." He sounded almost bored. "Here are my terms. The gala proceeds as scheduled. Ms. Rivera attends. She carries the final transfer codes in her clutch. No visible federal escort. No cancellation. No theatrical heroics." Luca cut in. "You don't set terms in my house." "In your house?" Vittorio chuckled. "Check your inbox. Board ratification landed 6 minutes ago. As of now, you are a guest in your own empire." Tommaso, pale but upright with fresh bandages under his shirt, was already at a laptop. He looked up once, grim, and nodded. "True." Vittorio continued. "At 9:14 p.m., during the family toast, my man will approach Ms. Rivera on the balcony. She will hand over the codes. If she is wired, if she deviates, if law enforcement appears before 9:20, Rico and your floor captain die on camera and the clips post to every newsroom in the city." Sienna closed her eyes, forcing her breath steady through rib pain and panic. "You're lying," she said. "You'll kill them anyway." "Possibly, but maybe not. I'm old-fashioned. I reward competence." A rustle, then a second male voice, ragged and furious despite whatever gag or blood was in his mouth. "Sienna, don't you dare!" A sharp sound cut him off. Luca's hand slammed the counter, splintering wood. "Proof of life every hour," Sienna said. "Video, time-stamped, with today's front page." Vittorio considered. "Reasonable. You have become annoyingly professional." "Location?" Luca demanded. "Come now. If you had that, this call would be shorter." Vittorio's tone cooled. "Decide quickly. If either hostage is moved by anyone but my men, I interpret that as breach." The line went dead. No one in the kitchen moved for a full 3 seconds. Then the penthouse erupted. Orders, screens, trackers, voice traffic on encrypted channels. Tommaso coordinated triage teams to search every property not directly tied to DeLuca paperwork. Luca started building 2 plans at once, with the dead focus of a man holding himself together by force. Sienna stood in the center of it. Rico's lighter in her palm, the metal edge digging a crescent into her skin. At 9:14 tonight, she had to walk into the Velvet Room smiling, carrying fake codes. Maybe real death, with no guarantee her people were even still alive. And somewhere in the city, Vittorio waited for her to flinch. Sienna did not flinch. At 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., the proof of life videos came exactly on the hour. Each one 30 seconds, each one framed to show Rico and Nia zip-tied to metal chairs in front of corrugated steel. Newspaper date visible. Vittorio's voice off camera, calm and theatrical. By the third video, panic had become data. "Pause," Sienna said. Luca, Tommaso, pale but standing, and ADA Naomi Kessler watched from the study screens, while Federal Tech mirrored the feed on a secure laptop. Sienna leaned in until her nose almost touched the glass. Back at 5 seconds. Slow. The frame stuttered. Rico coughed. Behind him, a strip of black plastic fluttered from a beam in a rhythm too regular for wind. "Listen," she said. Kessler frowned. "I hear traffic." "Not traffic. Forklift backup alarm. 3-beep cycle, older Crown model. And that hum, reefer unit compressor. They're near cold storage." Tommaso pointed. "There, reflection." In the chrome edge of Nia's chair, upside down and warped, a painted number flashed when Vittorio's man shifted. Bay 14. Sienna's pulse kicked. He wants us thinking random warehouse. Bay markings like that are at the Red Hook bonded docks and 2 food terminals in Hunts Point. Luca looked at the timestamp. Video sent at 5:59. Delay? Federal Tech answered. Metadata scrubbed. Not fully. Sienna tapped the corner. Compression artifact pattern changes at upload. He's filming on an old Android, forwarding through a relay. Find nearest towers with uplink spikes at 5:59 for burner IDs routed through encrypted app. Kessler stared at her for 1 heartbeat, then snapped to her team. Do it. At 6:22 p.m., the match came back. A cluster of pings near Pier 39 Annex Storage, Red Hook, private lease under Bell Tower Logistics, Vittorio's cousin again. Kessler turned to Luca. We can hit it. He said if they're moved. Luca started. Sienna cut in. He said if they're moved by anyone but his men, he interprets breach. So don't move them. Kessler's brow lifted. Explain. Your team goes in at 8:58 under FDNY emergency gas leak inspection with a sealed perimeter. You isolate comms in a 2-block radius for exactly 12 minutes, standard safety protocol. During that window, your people secure Rico and Nia, but keep them physically in the building, same chairs, same frame. At 9:10, you send Vittorio a fresh proof of life from his own burner relay saying, all stable. He thinks he still controls the room. Tommaso gave her a long look. You just designed a hostage extraction like a dinner turn. I run timing for a living. Luca studied her face, then nodded once. Do it. Kessler hesitated. And you? Sienna picked up the black clutch prepared on the island and clicked it open. Inside sat a slim trigger module, a mirrored flash drive, and lipstick. I go to my party. By 8:47 p.m., the Velvet Room looked reborn. New smoked glass, fresh lilies, brass polished to a hard shine. The jazz trio back on stage like the world had never cracked here. Donors in tuxedos and gowns lifted crystal flutes beneath chandeliers, while cameras from society pages captured smiles with predatory efficiency. Sienna descended the private staircase in a silver-black gown that fell liquid to the floor. Under the silk, Kevlar panels hugged her ribs and sternum. A wire sat hidden along her spine. Mic thread stitched into her left strap. Her bruise still ached where the first bullet had hit. She welcomed it. It kept her honest. Across the room, Luca stood with 2 captains near the bar. Dark suit, no tie, face carved from restraint. When their eyes met, he didn't smile. He just touched 2 fingers to his glass. Ready. At 9:03, Vittorio arrived to applause. He wore midnight blue and old confidence, silver hair immaculate, cufflinks like coins. He kissed cheeks, shook judges' hands, accepted compliments on resilience, and took his seat at the head of the crescent booth as if he'd never ordered blood. When he reached Sienna, he bent like a fond uncle greeting a niece. Cara, you survived ugly odds. I hate disappointing men, she said. His smile sharpened. Do we have what we discussed? She lifted the clutch a fraction after the toast. At 9:08, Kessler's voice whispered in Sienna's earpiece through the gala music. Inspection team in position. At 9:10, target secured in place, spoof video sent. Sienna let out one silent breath. At 9:13, she stepped to the small stage, took the microphone, and the room quieted in ripples. Faces turned up, donors, councilmen, captains, men who owned ships and men who owned stories. "Thank you all for supporting St. Bridget tonight," she said, voice clear across glass and velvet. "This room has always been about family. The kind you inherit, the kind you choose, the kind that tests what you'll protect." Vittorio lifted his flute from below, eyes never leaving her. Sienna kept going. "To family, may we never confuse silence with loyalty." At exactly 9:14 p.m., a man stepped from the balcony's shadow behind stage left, raised a compact pistol with a suppressor, and aimed at Luca. Sienna saw the muzzle track before anyone else did. She moved without thinking and without hesitation. One step off the stage, one pivot, straight into the line. Impact hit like a wrecking ball. Her body jerked sideways. Pain flashed white. Gasps shredded the room. She stayed on her feet. For one electric second, every face froze. Impossible. A woman shot and standing. Sienna slammed her clutch thumb switch. The ballroom LED wall behind the stage flickered, then erupted with files. Wire transfers, shell company maps, payment authorizations stamped VR advisory holdings, camera override logs, bell tower invoices, and a highlighted line item. Special consultancy, M. Rivera, route confirmation. Another page. Assassination payment disbursement, approved, V. DeLuca. The room detonated in shouting. "Lock doors," someone yelled. "No exits," another answered. Vittorio rose slowly, expression still controlled, and clapped once. "Creative forgery." Sienna ripped the mic from its stand and pointed at him. "Then sue me, uncle." In her ear, Kessler. "Federal units moving. 90 seconds. The gunman on the balcony fired again, wild now, crowd shoving his line, then vanished behind drape as security surged. Captains drew, rival bodyguards drew, and for 3 terrifying beats, the ballroom teetered on mass gunfire. Luca roared over it, voice like a whip. "Weapons down. Anyone fires, I bury you myself." Some listened, some didn't. Vittorio moved fast for his age. He grabbed Sienna by the arm, yanked her off balance against him, and pressed a slim pistol under her ribs where Kevlar ended. "Enough theater," he hissed in her ear, smiling for the room. "Tell your dog to stand down." Luca took one step forward, hands visible, murder in his eyes. "Let her go." Vittorio's phone appeared in his free hand, screen lit with a live split view. Rico and Naya still tied in warehouse chairs, a masked man behind them with a shotgun. "I lose signal. They die," Vittorio said loudly now, for Luca and the nearest captains to hear. "You all die slower. Choose." Sienna forced her breathing steady through pain. She looked at the phone, then at Vittorio's thumb hovering near the screen, then at the LED wall, still cycling evidence. Her voice came out calm. "You always did confuse control with timing." He frowned, tiny crack. In her ear, Kessler's whisper. "Hostages extracted from frame. Decoys in place. We have your mark." Sienna smiled at Vittorio. Small, vicious. "Your feed's 10 minutes old." He blinked once, then stabbed his screen, opening audio. A masked guard in the video barked. Neither hostage answered because neither of them was there. Vittorio's smile vanished. That was the only opening she needed. Sienna drove her heel down on his instep, slammed her elbow back into his sternum, and twisted hard to the left exactly the way her father had taught her at 16 for subway grabs. The shot fired, deafeningly close, bullet tearing through silk and grazing her side but missing organs. Vittorio lost grip for half a second. Luca closed distance like a strike. He caught Vittorio's gun wrist with both hands, slammed it into the stage edge, bone cracking audibly. The pistol clattered away. Vittorio screamed, then spat blood and swung a hidden blade from his sleeve toward Luca's throat. Sienna saw the flash first. Knife. She grabbed the microphone stand and rammed it between them. The blade punched into aluminum instead of flesh. Luca drove his shoulder into Vittorio's chest, taking both of them to the floor. Around them, chaos surged again as federal agents flooded in from service corridors in windbreakers marked FBI and U.S. Marshals. "Federal, drop it!" echoed over breaking glass and saxophone feedback. One of Vittorio's loyalists raised a gun near table 12. Sienna snatched the fallen pistol with both hands, heavy, wrong, and leveled it the way her father taught. Front sight, breathe, command voice. "Don't," she snapped. He hesitated. That was enough for agents to tackle him. On the floor, Luca had Vittorio pinned, forearm across his throat, eyes gone black with history. The old man clawed and cursed in Sicilian, then switched to English for the room. "You weak child. Finish it, or they'll call you traitor forever." Luca's grip tightened. One more inch, and it would be done. Sienna dropped to one knee beside them, breath ragged. "Luca, look at me." He didn't. "Luca." His eyes flicked to hers, raw, wrecked. She held him there. "You gave me your word." Vittorio laughed, choking. "She owns you now." "Good," Sienna said without looking away from Luca. "Stand down." For a long, endless beat, Luca trembled with the effort not to kill. Then he shifted his weight, ripped Vittorio's arms behind his back, and shoved him toward the agents instead. "He goes alive," Luca said hoarsely. "With everything." Kessler arrived at the edge of the stage, hair loose from its pins, badge out. "Vittorio De Luca, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, obstruction, and—" Vittorio straightened as much as cuffs allowed, blood on his teeth, dignity in tatters, but voice still venom smooth. "You think this ends with paper? There is no clean version of this family." Sienna stepped close enough for only him to hear. "There is tonight." As agents hauled him through the ballroom, donors ducked cameras, councilmen pretended shock, and captains stared at Luca like they were watching one era execute another. On the LED wall, the final file opened. The 9:11 p.m. camera override with dual authentication, one credential listed clear as neon. V. De Luca, Legacy Admin. No one in that room could unsee it. The music had stopped. The chandeliers still burned. An EMT pressed gauze to Sienna's side in a curtained corner of the back office, while she hissed through her teeth and refused morphine. "Grays only," the medic said. "Lucky angle." "Not luck," she muttered. "Tailoring." Outside the curtain came a flood of voices. Agents cataloging weapons, lawyers demanding clients, captains arguing in low, dangerous tones. Every few seconds, a camera flash stung through fabric. Nia pushed through first with 2 federal officers and a paramedic. Thermal blanket around her shoulders, wrists banded from fresh checks, eyes wet and furious. She grabbed Sienna's face in both hands. "You are never allowed to be casual about dresses again." Sienna laughed, then winced. Noted. A minute later, Rico stumbled in under escort, split lip, wrists raw, pulse ox clip still on one finger, alive and shaking on his feet. Rico saw Sienna's blood and went white. "Boss, I'm okay." She touched his arm. "You?" "Got kidnapped on my day off. 2 stars, terrible service." She barked a laugh that turned into a shaky exhale. Relief hit like delayed shock, knees weak, vision briefly blurring. Kessler entered with a stack of forms and a face trying hard not to show adrenaline. Both hostages are physically recovered and medically cleared for immediate danger. They're under federal protection and out of Vittorio's reach. Leverage is gone. She lifted the forms. We've got Vittorio, 3 shooters, 2 financial controllers, and probable cause for 14 warrants by sunrise. Your trigger dump hit our servers and 3 newsrooms. You just made my career and ruined my weekend. Happy to multitask, Sienna said. Kessler glanced toward the main floor where Luca was being swarmed by captains. He's got a narrow window to prevent retaliation. If his people fracture tonight, we'll have bodies by dawn. Sienna pulled the gauze tighter, stood despite the medic's protest, and walked into the ballroom. The floor looked like aftermath and opera. Shattered crystal, overturned chairs, white tablecloth streaked with shoe prints and blood. Luca stood at center, flanked by Renzetti and 2 younger captains, voices rising. Vittorio had board ratification. One snapped. Board signed under fraud and coercion. Another shot back. West Side will test us before sunrise. Luca saw Sienna and fell silent. She climbed onto the stage, took the house mic, bent, still functional, and tapped once. Feedback squealed. Every head turned. If any of you walk out tonight planning revenge freelance, she said, voice carrying hard, you're not loyal, you're lazy. A few men bristled. She kept going. Vittorio wanted a street war because war erases ledgers and buries witnesses. You give him that, he wins from a holding cell. You hold your lines, pay your people, and submit every account for audit by 10 a.m. You keep your businesses and your freedom. Renzetti stared. Audit by who? By me, Sienna said, and federal monitors you now cannot bribe. Murmurs, anger, calculation. She pointed to the LED wall, frozen on the transfer map. Your choices are not tradition versus betrayal. Your choices are adaptation or prison. Pick fast. Silence stretched. Then Renzetti, old and practical, gave one grudging nod. My crews hold. One by one, others followed. It wasn't trust. It was gravity. Enough for tonight. Luca watched her from 10 feet away, like he was seeing a new center of the room form in real time. By 2:36 a.m., witness statements began. By 4:10, federal seizure teams were rolling on shell offices. By dawn, every morning show in the city had her face and the phrase "Velvet Room Whistleblower" under it, which was inaccurate and close enough. Sienna sat on the backstage stairs wrapped in a blanket. Blood dried stiff at her side and let the noise recede to a dull tide. She was alive again. So were her people. And nothing, absolutely nothing, was still pretending to be what it had been yesterday. 3 nights later, the Velvet Room was closed to the public, lit only by work lamps and the ghost blue glow of emergency strips. No jazz, no perfume, no lies in crystal. Sienna stood at the empty bar in jeans and a black tee, reviewing a draft consent decree term sheet while ice machines hummed in the back. Luca came in through the service door carrying 2 paper cups from the bodega around the corner. Real coffee, he said. No poison. I watched the guy make it and offended him by asking for camera footage. She accepted a cup. Growth. He leaned on the bar across from her, looked older than he had a week ago, and more honest. A healing cut marked his jaw. He had not been sleeping much either. For a minute, they just drank in the quiet where gunshots had been. Then Luca said, I keep replaying the stage. If that second shot had been 2 inches, it wasn't. That's not the point. It is if we're going to live in reality. His mouth tightened, then eased. Reality, I love you. No preface, no hedge. Just the words, dropped between them like a live wire. Sienna stilled. He held her gaze and kept going anyway. Not as leverage, not as obsession. Not because you survived something dramatic and I confused adrenaline for fate. I loved you before the shot. I loved you when you were yelling about table rotations and threatening councilmen with decaf. I love you now when you terrify captains twice your size. Her eyes burned unexpectedly. You're really bad at subtlety when you decide not to be. I am done being subtle where it matters. She set the coffee down carefully. I love you too. That's the easy sentence. He gave a short, pained laugh. And the hard one? The hard one is, I won't do love that costs me agency. I won't be protected by lies. I won't be handled. Then don't, he said immediately. Tell me terms. Sienna reached into her tote and pulled out 2 folders. He blinked. You brought contracts to a feelings talk? I'm from the Bronx. Feelings need infrastructure. Despite himself, he smiled. She opened the first folder. Corporate Governance Addendum. No undisclosed accounts, no operations off-book, dual authorization on transfers above $5 million. Compliance has independent reporting line not revocable without board and monitor approval. He nodded. Done. Second folder. A single-page personal agreement. Typed, absurd, and deadly serious. Read, she said. He did, lips moving on the lines. No decisions made, for your own good, without your informed consent. If either party withholds material risk information, relationship pauses pending disclosure and mediated review. No weaponizing intimacy in operational disputes. Quarterly check-in with neutral counselor, because apparently we are both stubborn and traumatized. Luca looked up, eyes glass-bright with exhausted amusement. You put our relationship under compliance. I put us where we can survive ourselves. He signed both pages without another word, then slid them back and held out the pen. She signed. They stood there with ink drying while the ice machine rattled like distant rain. Luca came around the bar slowly, giving her room to stop him. She didn't. He touched her face with both hands, reverent and shaking just slightly. I don't know what normal looks like for us, he said. Probably weird and over-documented. Then weird. He kissed her gently first, like asking. She answered by grabbing his shirt and pulling him in harder, until both of them had to laugh against each other's mouths because relief was finally allowed in the room. When they broke apart, foreheads touching, he whispered, "Thank you for making me keep my word." She kissed the scar on his jaw. "Thank you for keeping it." In the office upstairs, 2 signed contracts lay side by side under a brass paperweight shaped like a lion. For the first time since 9/14, neither of them felt like a hostage. 6 months later, Friday night traffic on West Broadway still sounded like impatience and money. Inside the Velvet Room, the pressure had changed shape. The judges were still here, and the models, and the men who used to speak only in euphemism. But now there were compliance placards in staff corridors, monitored camera logs no one person could erase, and a federal observer at table 4 eating Dover sole with visible boredom. The jazz trio had union breaks. Payroll hit on time. No photos signs meant privacy, not impunity. In a glass-walled office above the mezzanine, Sienna Rivera, Chief Compliance Officer, DeLuca Group, was etched in clean white lettering. She stood over a conference table with Kessler, now promoted and smug about it, and Tommaso, thinner but recovered, reviewing final signatures on the consent decree implementation report. Logistics Division split filed this morning, Kessler said. Nightlife arm clean. security subsidiary under external audit for another year. Tommaso slid a folder over. Bruno took his cooperation deal, 2 years supervised release and permanent ban from handling surveillance systems. Sienna initialed page 17. He can go calibrate sprinklers. Kessler smirked, and Vittorio entered plea at 10 o'clock. 12 years federal, asset forfeiture, no contact order. Sienna paused only a second at that, then signed the last line. After they left, Nia swept in carrying 2 mocktails and a tablet. Menu costs down 6%, customer complaints down 40%, and one hedge fund idiot asked if we're still mob-adjacent chic. I told him we're consent decree couture. Promote yourself again and I'll approve it again, Sienna said. Rico knocked on the open doorframe, security earpiece in, healed wrists visible when he gestured. Your 9 p.m. is here early. Send him. At exactly 9:14 p.m., Luca stepped into her office carrying a long, slim case. He wore a dark suit with no blood on it, no hidden panic in his posture. There were still shadows in him. There always would be, but now they were named. I have something, he said. He opened the case on the table. Inside, mounted on black velvet behind museum glass, was the dented ballistic vest, ugly, bulky center panel caved inward where the first bullet had struck. A small brass plaque beneath read, 9:14 p.m. Impact absorbed. Life continued. Sienna stared at it for a long moment, fingers resting lightly on the case edge. It belongs here, Luca said, not as a warning, as evidence. She looked up at him. Of what? That you chose. Her throat tightened, but she smiled. Help me with the wall. Together they lifted the case and hung it beside the office window overlooking the same smoked glass bridge where she had once fallen and not died. Below them, the room pulsed. Trays moving on time, crystal chiming, people pretending things they could no longer fully hide. Sienna checked the floor through the glass, tapped her earpiece, and said, Table 12 needs another bottle, and tell the councilman's aide he's staying exactly where he is. In the reflection, Luca laughed softly. At 9:14 p.m. on the anniversary night, under city light and reinforced glass, Sienna Rivera stood straight in her own office, her scars under silk, her authority in ink, and the vest that saved her life shining like a hard-won promise. The night she was supposed to die had become the night she chose again, the life and the love she would fight for.